After a master's, getting the right job is more important than getting a job.
Like these companies have to pay the placement cell to be the first ones to come because then they can hire the cream.
That who the hell revokes the offer 2 weeks before the joining date?
Yeah. Eventually, everything works out for the best. You just realize it later, but it just always works out for the best. That's for sure.
So hi Aditya, thank you so much for taking out time to be with us over here today. And the main aim of this entire conversation is just going to be helping the future people who are about to join LPS and other universities around UK and Europe in general about how to get into PVC and how LPS helped you in this process and general tips about how to go about the job process and what are the key tips and tricks that you will keep in mind, would advise anyone who is applying to keep in mind too.
Yeah, hi Anya. I'm happy to be a part of this. Happy to help out with my experience and whatever I have gone through during my recruitment process.
Thank you, Aditya. Can we start by you telling us a little bit about yourself, what you're doing, etc.?
Yeah, sure. So I started off my education with engineering in India. I did an engineering in computer science at DCE Delhi. Worked for Barclays for a year. I was a quant engineer with Barclays. I joined LBS after that. So I was pursuing the MIM program there. After LBS, I joined Fasanara Capital. Fasanara is a private credit hedge fund. I was working for their venture capital strategy. So I had a very good experience working for Fasanara Capital. I worked there for a year. After a year, last year, I joined my family business back in Assam. So we manufacture tea across parts of Assam and Arunachal Pradesh. So currently, I've been engaged with that, and I'm working on a couple of things on the side as well.
Very cool. So I think our first question would be to understand that you had a very great job at Barclays. I mean, Barclays quant is great. So what made you want to go to LBS or go for a master's in general?
Yeah, sure. So my role at Barclays was like it was very engineering centric. I was coding all day on Python and SAS, and I was a quant engineer for them. So we basically devised statistical models for the lending book of Barclays. I was not very interested in pursuing that in the long run. I was looking for a business program which gave me a compact understanding of everything, and I was not willing to wait for a few years to pursue an MBA after say 3 4 years. I wanted that immediately. So I was looking for early career programs outside of India. I was also looking for an international exposure through the program. So LBS did check all those boxes, and also there were some additional benefits of say the brand value that came with it, the
Yeah.
network which I got to be a part of. So that was my primary motivation behind LBS.
So basically it was more like कि pivot करना है इतने को मतलब coding वाले sector
Yeah.
से you want to pivot into a more generalized sector. Makes sense. I think that's why most people go for a master's. They want to pivot from their current field, like, and it's a good way to specialize in something else. And MIM, I think, is a great alternative to MBA because it just gives you a good balance of management skills and technical skills that you've gained from your undergrad. So I think, yeah, makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. I think that my job at Barclays was a very zoomed in image of something which the bank does. After MIM, after my job at Fasanara, I got a very zoomed out image of how things work in the industry.
Yeah.
So like that was the major difference between my job at Barclays and my job after LBS at Fasanara.
And did
When getting
LBS
into LPS, did you have it in your head that you want to get into PVC after graduating, or was it something that you figured out later?
Not really. Like my motivation behind LBS initially was not to get a job. I was planning on coming back to the family business directly after LBS. Like I had a very unique experience with recruiting. So in April, May, a couple of months before graduating from LBS, some headhunters from Revolut contacted me on LinkedIn, and they were like, just go for an interview because like the recruitment scene was very optimistic back then when I was graduating. So some guys from Revolut contacted me. They asked me to take an interview like upfront, that come and take an interview with us and all that. I ended up
And you
taking an
did.
interview. I was like, yeah, I just casually went for an interview with the HR and everything. I had a couple more rounds after that. Revolut ended up giving me the offer. It was a very generous offer. It was supposed to be like one of the uh, best paid offers in LBS because Revolut did hire a few people back then, and they were very generous with their offer. But then the tech downturn started. So
Yeah.
when I was back in India in July, August,
Oh,
that is
I
when
know what's
Revolut.
coming.
Yeah, yeah. So Revolut started revoking offers.
Yeah.
So uh, three other guys with me had joined, were supposed to join Revolut in the graduate program thing, and we were all recruited for the strategy operations of Revolut. Uh, I got my offer revoked in August. I was supposed to join by the mid of August. So I was like, I had already planned on working in London for a year, so might as well look for something else.
Right.
I had a couple of things in mind, either tech strategy or VC. VC was very niche, so I also had the tech strategy thing going on by the side, so that if I don't end up working in VC, I'll have something to bank on. Luckily, the Fasanara thing worked out well for me, and it worked out within 2 weeks. So
Wow.
Oh,
I didn't
wow.
have to even cancel my ticket or anything. So I went back to London on the same ticket, and like, that is how things worked out. But yes, it was very unique in the sense that I was not planning on recruiting initially. I ended up joining Revolut. I did not prepare anything before Revolut or after Revolut because I did not have to. I did prepare a few case studies while interviewing for Revolut, but then once the offer was revoked, it was very stressful because I did not prepare anything. I did not have an idea of how things work recruiting in
Yeah.
London. So luckily enough, I got something in a very quick time. So I ended up joining them.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's crazy.
I had a very, very similar experience, my offer got revoked 15 days before I was supposed to join. I was joining a consulting firm, Simon Kutcher, and they
Achha.
revoked my offer 2 weeks before joining, and I was in the same
And
place
at
as you.
that
But
time, we were discussing that who the hell revokes the offer 2 weeks before the joining date. And now
yeah.
another
No,
example of
I had heard about Revolut doing this in the previous year.
I only
Someone
told
had told
you
me.
because I had spoken to
Yeah.
about it.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah,
spoke to him only. Okay, got it. Yeah, so it happens. It's
yeah,
messy.
yeah. Of course. I think it happened for the better because like I was keen on working in VC, but I was not applying as actively when I already had a job with Revolut. Once I lost that job, that is when
Yeah.
things got tense and I was applying more actively.
You won't believe it, but the day my offer got revoked is the day we started UniAdvise. We like नहीं करना है, जॉब नहीं करना है, ये करेंगे हम, कुछ अपना करेंगे. But then
That's
eventually I've always wanted to work, so I thought कि apply करेंगे. Then I went back home, came back in, sorry, I'm a little cold. So I came back in September and then started recruiting again. And then I got my job offer in November. So yeah, it's been messy, but I think for your year it was still a lot of people were getting a lot of offers, right?
yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
We
so
like
just to
in
give
our
a
year, lots
background
of people.
to the audience, like Aditya was recruiting during the COVID year, and during the COVID year, like people were very, very generous in terms of the offers they were giving. And
Yeah.
that's finally also the reason why the next year the hiring was a bit slow because that overhired the year before, which is Aditya's year, right?
Yeah, so basically Aditya graduated in 2022 and Anya and I graduated in 2023. Yeah.
Even like lots of my batchmates and people before them are getting laid off now as well because the hiring was so
Really?
optimistic back then. Yeah, yeah. So the hiring was so optimistic back then that everyone overhired. Like everyone overhired a lot. I've also heard a few VC funds closing up their London office like in the last year. A
Yeah,
couple of
2, 3 of them.
decently big ones. Yeah.
Damn, this is bad. I don't know when it's gonna get better. And I'm in London and I have people around me applying this year, people who are graduating in 2024. It's even harder for them. It's even messier right now, to be very honest. But yeah, I mean, one thing I've noticed is everyone eventually finds something. You just have to keep at it. It might take a little longer, but you eventually find something. Everyone we know who wanted to find a job has found it by now.
Right.
So I think
Like
it's just,
one
it just
mistake that many of us made because we had your year as an example, right? So all of us thought that it's very easy to get a job after LVS. So people only applied to the big firms or the MNCs or the bulge brackets,
yeah,
and they didn't really apply with the boutique firms or the startups, right? In the early on months. And that's what I think delayed the hiring in the first place. And once they
yeah.
realized that that's not working out and they should broaden their horizons, that's when they started applying to the smaller firms, and that's when things started to work out.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, but I think that like after a master's, getting the right job is more important than getting a job because
Correct.
most of the people won't go for an education after their masters.
Right.
This is
Yeah.
where like they have to find an industry and making a switch after they've started working in an industry. the making a switch becomes much more difficult than after a master's or say after an
Correct.
MBA. So I
I,
guess that
I agree with you. Yeah, so
yeah,
that's why you pick your, like when you come fresh out of your undergrad, you're open to things like you want to
yeah,
just explore and see ki kya hota hai, because you don't know what you want to do. But by the
uh,
time you're done with your masters, you kind of have an idea of what you want to do, and hence you're pickier, which is I think is fair because you've made such a huge investment and it's fair to be pickier.
of
Yeah.
course, like, after undergrad, especially with India, the scene was that whoever comes to the campus to recruit, you just end up applying to
Fly
almost all
everywhere.
of them. Yeah. With
Yeah.
engineering in India, like specifically, it depends on the order of the companies that arrive on campus. So it's not even like you have an industry pinned down or you have a particular role pinned down.
Just
It's
a plan.
about who comes first
Yeah,
into the
yeah.
campus and
Yeah,
who
that's
ends.
why companies, in India, undergrad companies want to be the first ones to come. Like I remember D Shaw was the first one that came to Hansraj when I was in Hansraj. So I remember that like these companies have to pay the placement cell to be the first ones to come because then they can hire the cream. And
Yeah,
these placement cells have these conditions, no, that if you get an offer, you can't apply to another
yeah.
company, etc., etc. So yeah, इसलिए companies compete in coming first to colleges there.
But I think after masters, being choosy and being like having an industry pinned down is very important because
Yeah.
it won't be as easy to make a switch after your masters. And like, uh, it's not like it's not something you can change very easily after you've entered into an industry. So it's like if you've entered VC, it's not very easy to get into IB or something like that, which is like very different from what you're doing on an everyday basis. So I think that I was thankful that I had that view after I lost my offer with Revolut, because if I would have ended up joining that particular role, my role again would have been very zoomed in into
Yeah.
one particular thing, uh, and it was not supposed to be like a broad view of everything that was happening in the industry.
Eventually, everything works out for the best. You just realize it later, but it just always works out for the best. That's for sure. I wanted to understand one thing. So, you said that you managed to work out this VC job offer in 2 weeks. So, I would want to understand how those 2 weeks went and how you like what was your mindset after your offer got revoked? How you decided to apply? Where did you apply? And
And getting
how was
up
the
too
process?
soon because usually when you lose a job, right, you are just crashed that okay, not right now. I need like 5-10 days and then we'll see. So how
I
did
took a month. I took a month.
yeah. And especially when you know that you don't have any background in applying towards jobs, right? Because you didn't apply in the first place properly, you only applied through a headhunter, and that's different. So, how did you manage to prepare yourself in those 2 weeks about how to go about these things, and what is it that you followed? Like, what was the approach that you followed?
So I think that with my job hunt process, I think that the first thing was that I pinned down tech strategy and VC, so I knew what I was going to apply for. Uh, now, within tech strategy and VC, I was keen on working in fintech. I had experience working with Barclays in a fintech-like role within a high street bank. Uh, I knew I knew the space decently well, and I was kind of using my networks initially. I was speaking to as many people I'd spoken to during LBS. Lots of them were like MBAs or the executive program guys, so they had a lot of experience with these things. They were already working for guys in senior roles, much more senior to me. So I think that network actually helped me get the role. I knew a guy who was working at Fasanara and I knew him like decently well. He helped me get the first interview. With my particular experience, like I think that something worked really well for me was I had worked in the lending division of Barclays, and Fasanara is a fintech lending fund. So we specialize with lending products online. So that alignment worked out perfectly well for me, which I think is very important if you're recruiting for VC. If you're recruiting for something more general, then it's not as relevant. But this thing worked out well for me. I was also in the process for uh, a few other tech companies, but then like this worked out for me, so I ended up pursuing all those opportunities altogether. But I think that when I was recruiting, the market was not as bad as it is right now. Like even back then, recruitments were still happening, and everyone was still fairly active. Now the situation is very different, so I'm sure it'll be much more tougher now. But back then I was lucky enough that firstly my network thing worked out, secondly my job aligned with the role that was being recruited for, and third that everyone was fairly open to recruiting new people. So
Yeah.
yeah.
I think right now, what people are struggling with the most are getting interviews itself. Like, that's the most difficult part because after that, once you're in the process, you can prove yourself, you can, find your way through it. But the hardest part is getting an interview. And like you said, you were in the process for a couple of interviews. That even that's a big deal for us, right? Because we saw people struggling getting. I barely got what 3 to 4 interviews in a span of 6 months. So I think the most difficult bit right now is to get an interview. And I think one of the best ways to do that is through the network. And I think you did a pretty good job at building a network with your MBAs and EMBAs. I mean, that's really important considering we don't get to interact a lot with MBAs as early master students, right? Like you have to go out of your way to do that.
Definitely. And with VCs, like when Fasanara was recruiting, Fasanara had not like advertised this position anywhere. This happened through a network. Fasanara was advertising in a couple of college domains where they were active, but not like very publicly. So I think that if you want to work particularly in VC, networking becomes one of the main things. If you're at LBS or if you're at any or if you're anywhere else, network becomes very important within like small firms where the work culture is very different, where the teams are very much tied up. So the power of referral also increases exponentially when the teams are very close, knit and everything. So
Yeah, and
Yeah.
in general also like VCs talk a lot, right? I mean, they are really, really fond of talking. So I think in general in this industry also because people talk so much and they just want to know more about, what's going on, it just works faster and in a more efficient way, any kind of a network or reference, right? And
What do you
yeah.
mean by they talk a lot?
they just like to talk, bro. I love that. That they'll just like if you meet them and you just start a conversation about any advice, they'll spend the next 30 minutes
Okay,
genuinely.
people in VCs, you're saying.
Yeah, that they really like to talk and know more about you and understand what's going on. And they listen. It's not like they'll just,
Okay.
listen from here and then take it out from there. They'll store in the head, process information which matters, and then deliver on it and see if it's something useful that they can, make use of. So
Yeah,
that,
because that's a part of the job. Yeah.
yeah. So that,
25% of our job was just talking to people.
yeah, yeah.
25% of it was that
Very
only.
cool. Very cool.
Okay, so just to get a more zoomed in image of how networking works and what are the key things in networking essentially that worked out for you. For example, coffee chats, or how did you reach out to the people who are senior to you. So just to give people a detailed insight into how to actually go about it, because everyone says networking, but everyone is just clueless about what steps to take, right?
I think that for me, Anya, like networking was not something I went out of my way and did. I was just active in a few things. I played cricket a bit. I tried kickboxing a few times at LBS. I tried a few other things. I was a member of the Hack LBS team. I was also part of the music club. So just being a part of lots of things and just interacting with people and just building personal connections was the primary mode of networking for me personally. I was not like I'm not a very social person that I'll go to a networking event and I'll talk to everyone and I'll sort of build relationships in that 5 minute talking time. So like that is not something that worked for me. I was just active in a lot of things and I naturally built like good relations with people who were with me in those things and like whom I got to interact with during those things. So I think that is more important than sort of having a if you have an artificial networking sort of an environment where everyone is there to just meet people. I think
Yeah.
that the networks that you create naturally is much more important than something which happens artificially.
And I think they're more personal also because when you're meeting, like if 10 people are meeting one single person at a networking event, right? Then that person is meeting 10 people. So they don't have any sort of personal motivation to be really yours or genuinely know you, right? It's just something that they have to do and they're
Yeah.
just there to talk. Unless
And
you
I
really have like
think
a very out of the way conversation.
And I think more than that, like Aditya pointed out, so he was just doing things that he loved, for example, music or kickboxing or cricket. He was just doing things that he loved with people with similar interests. So you just bond better. And that's when you actually build a connection, right? When we go to a networking event, everyone knows that you're here to get something from them, right? You need something from them. But when you're just playing cricket with them or just vibing on music or whatever, they know that you are here just to have fun and you guys connect. And then after at a later point, oh, you need help, and they're of course then they'll be very, very happy to help you because they know you and they connected with you. The
Mhm.
networking that you intentionally try to do, that is very artificial, and that's not the real connection that you're building. I
I
think
think like specifically with early career guys as well, if you're networking professionally somewhere, there's not a lot of things you can give back to someone because you don't have a lot of
right.
experience personally, and you have not like achieved a lot because you've just started off with your work life at that point. But if you're building personal relations and if someone is helping you out as a friend, I think that that would be much more useful to you as well because your referral or the person who refers you is not expecting something in return from
Yeah.
you in general. So I think
Yeah.
that is something becomes
And
important for early career guys.
And to summarize how to get about this natural referral thing, I think in my head, I know two good ways in LBS. One is through these clubs and societies that you join because they have MBAs, EMBAs, early careers, all of them together. And another way would be to through these electives that you have. Like I remember I had this digital marketing elective, and I was the only person from my class in that elective. And I had all MBAs, EMBAs, people, directors of companies, so that class was my favorite class because you had so much to learn, and that's where you sit with the same people in a class, and that's when they know you and you know them, right? You work on group projects, etc. So I think these are two good ways to build a network.
Yeah, definitely. Even I had a similar experience with my electives as well. Like the cohort was like very diverse in terms of the experience, in terms of
Yeah.
everything. So definitely.
And also we have sundowners at LBS, so that was also very
Yeah.
fun. I mean, if you want to, you can just get very drunk at one of these events and just be best friends with an MBA. That's another way to network. You can go about, right?
Are you talking from personal experience, Anya?
Might be, might not be. Who knows?
Yeah, yeah. The
But
sundowners are great.
yeah. So
Yeah.
also another thing, all right. So you mentioned that you applied 2 weeks before for this job at Fasana, but at the same time, when, for example, if a person wants to get into PEVC and everyone around them is applying like 1 year early on because they're targeting industries like consulting or IB, which have recruitment starting 1 year early on. For example, it's all the buzz brackets or all the good MBB or Big Four, everything. They just start off hiring like 1 year in advance, so you have such FOMO that you also want to apply, but at the same time you realize that PEVC jobs are much more immediate. There are very few graduate programs in PEVC, and if you really want to get in, then you have to just apply very proactively in the later months. So how did you like? Do you have any insights? I know the thing was very different for you, but at the same time, seeing so many people around you and having worked in PEVC for a year, what insights do you have on how to go about the entire planning the job application process?
I think that if I talk about PE and VC, these both are very distinct in terms of the kind of things that is required in joining. If you're talking about an early stage VC, and if you are like a fresh graduate looking to work for an early stage VC, they would not look for a very intensive knowledge in finance. What they would look for is that you are genuinely interested in a particular domain or in a particular business space that you can talk a lot about, that you know a lot about, and just like a strong motivation to work in VC. If you're talking about a PE fund, I'm sure they would look for like very strong and core financial knowledge, uh, working on financial models and everything. So these two are very different, but I think that you can have certain backup sectors which are similar to something else that you want to work on, like as a primary sector. So if you want to work in VC, you can take tech strategy along with it and sort of start applying for tech strategy early on, and then once the time comes for VC, you can look into the VC space because VCs recruit closer to the joining date.
Yeah.
But tech strategy, at least like the mature tech companies, recruit slightly ahead of time. So I think that you can take a backup sector, but I don't think you should apply for anything and everything that comes along the way. Because if you end up getting into it, if you end up working in that sector or in that domain later on, then it'll become very difficult to switch. So I think that having something similar where you can make a switch into the thing that you want to get into in the first place, that makes more sense other than applying for things that come along the way, say consultancy or IB or
That
these things?
reminds me that one of like I was in the PVC club at LGS, right? And the head of PVC club, I was very close to him because he was like, yeah, I mean, I was very close to him. So he gave me one advice when I was thinking of applying to all these VC firms early on in the early months of LGS. That I asked him the same question. I remember that right now there are no jobs that are open. So what do I do? Everyone around me is applying, and what do I do? So that's what he told me, that spend these months preparing an Excel sheet of all the companies, all the VCs that you're interested in, the industry that they're targeting, what are the two, three key deals that they've worked on in the last year, the key people who are, one level senior to you, who you can relate to, but at the same time, they're senior to you, and just like genuine network and know more about them. Target those 10 companies, but spend the next 3, 4 months just doing that. And if you do it the right way, there's no way it won't work out, because it will have to work out, because that's the only way they have. Right? That's literally the three things are that you know the people, you know the work, you know the industry. That is it. And if you know how to talk, which you do, then you're good to go. So
Yes, I think that's very true. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
that
even with my experience with interviews, like most of the conversation was around an industry, it was around a particular company, or it was around a particular trend which had come up, because it's just about whether or not you can have an interesting conversation about some particular thing within an industry for 30 minutes during that interview. uh, it's not about practically looking at financials or solving an Excel sheet and sort of working out a DCF model or anything, because with early stage VCs, the companies are so small that I have rarely worked on like huge chunk of Excel workbooks uh, when I was working for Fasanara, because most of our investments were early stage investments and they were not mature enough to have, say, 5 years, 7 years uh, of data with them, or very visible trends which I could see across that data. So I think that it's very important to have a knowledge of the sector, have a knowledge of particular companies or deals that they've worked on, and like as you said as well, that if you're looking at just 10 VCs, just know people there, look at what they're doing, what new is happening within their sector, and just have interesting conversations with the people working there.
as you mentioned that finance skills are important but not as important in VCs in general. So what are the three skills that you feel are very very essential when it comes to highlighting on your CV or on your cover letter when applying to VC?
I think that when applying to VC, the first thing is that you need to show a very strong motivation as to why you want to work in VC. Because if you are an early career person, then it becomes very difficult for you to get into VC, because not a lot of VCs recruit people at the analyst level or at the senior analyst level. Mostly it starts at the associate level. So having a strong motivation as to why you want to work in VC and having a mental roadmap in place as to where you'll go from there becomes very important. That is like one of the first things which I believe is very important if you want to work in VC. Second is that sector specific knowledge and interest, both of these. So the sector that the VC works on, say if it's fintech, you need to have a fairly deep knowledge about what are the subsectors within fintech, or how things work within fintech, and what are the valuations look like, what are the recent important deals that have taken place, and just have some views on certain trends that have come up in the industry. And I think the third thing is that, like people say about having a cultural fit, it is a very vague thing to say, but it does become very important if you're working for a VC fund or a PE fund, or any hedge fund for that matter, because it's a very small team. You really have to mix well with the team there. You really have to like be friends with the people you work with, because you don't have, say, 150 people working in the same office space you can interact with other people every day. It's just 15-20 people that work in your office. So I think that cultural fit, like there is no particular definition for a culture fit, just that you do fit
I
into that environment, you
I
do
think it's
you
just
do
the
fit into
vibe
that
check,
company.
right? The modern day vibe check.
Yeah.
You need to be vibing with those people.
Yeah.
Okay, just an amateur question. So I have no idea about the VC industry because I was looking into consulting, so I don't know. But I want to understand. So you said that VCs have particular industries that they work in. So they look at So they only consider, how do VCs work? Like, do they only consider um s- companies or startups in a particular industry, or how does it work?
So like usually there are two categories of VC. One is the generalist VC, which will
Okay.
do any and every deal everywhere.
Okay.
Within those VCs, I have seen there are specialist teams which look at particular things. Say a particular VC, which is a generalist VC or a global VC, might have a team for emerging markets. They might have a team for developed markets. There might be a team for fintech which looks specifically into that sector. There might be a team which looks into cyber security. So these are different, and what I have had experience mostly with are specialist VCs. They would look into, say, B2B tech or
Yeah.
SaaS businesses, or like the fund that I was working for looked into fintech lending. So fintech lending again is, even within fintech, it's a one subsector of fintech.
Yeah.
So that becomes a very niche thing that they look into. So I think that uh, this, having a knowledge of that particular thing that the VC looks
Got it.
into, becomes very important if you are applying to a specialist VC. If you are applying to a like with generalist VCs, I have seen people with IB backgrounds get into generalist VCs more, or people who have had some experience within the industry in general, and then they make a switch after 3 4 years of experience.
Got it.
They tend to get a better chance at generalist VCs.
Got it. Got it.
So thank you so much for giving us detailed insights about how to go about everything related to VCs. And just like one ending question. So if someone asked you that what are the key things that you learned out of being involved in VC for a year and then coming back to your family business, what would those key things be?
I think that my experience with VC was in a time where the market was in a downturn. There was a lot of glamour about VC, about startups in 2020, 2021. I saw the real picture on how things are. I got to see, like, at core, how companies operate, how VCs operate. I started having a lot of respect for traditional companies which operate in a stable, profitable, and a decently growing manner. I think coming back, I think that was something very important which I got out of my experience working in VC, that I could see through that glamour and through that glitter which generally exists in the industry. And this was one of the key things which I got out of my experience working for a VC fund. But I think that I had a very good experience working for Pasanara Capital, because I got to see a broad picture of how things are in the industry in general. What do decent benchmarks look at? I could benchmark things based on my experience, because I got to see, I saw financials of companies almost on a daily basis. So there were very good benchmarks that I developed working in VC. So coming back, those were very helpful in day-to-day activities of working in my family business. Of course, those are not as relevant because it is a completely different industry that I'm working in right now. But yes, the broader picture did help me with some broader decisions in life, in terms of my career, in terms of the work I'm doing in general.
And of course, the monetary perks that
Yeah,
that
of course.
comes along. And one last question I have. So I want to understand what the ladder looks like. So is there anything else we can pivot into after a VC? Like, are there people who join maybe some companies that they're dealing with, or like how does it work?
People do.
Yes, yes. It happens, like, it happens very commonly that the portfolio companies might end up recruiting someone who is
Yeah,
at an associate or at a principal level. So lots of VCs have that clause in the recruitment letter as well, that a portfolio company, you can't work for a portfolio company or a competitor for the next 1 or 2 years, something like that.
got it.
So that does happen a lot. I have seen people move from VC to a startup of their own, to joining a bunch of people in a financial position at a slightly senior role. So there are options after VC, but I don't think that the options are as much as in consultancy or say
Yeah,
IB.
yeah,
These two fields have a lot of options open
yeah,
after 3 4 5, even 10 years.
yeah.
After VC, there are not a lot of doors that are open for you after 10 years.
And I
Correct.
also feel that many people, for example, many people do IB only with the sole goal that they want to enter VC in, as an end goal. Or consulting for like 5 6 years and then VC as the end goal. So usually it's for people, it's like earning money 5 6 years in IB or consulting, then joining VC, then becoming an angel investor. Like that's the dream life for any corporate person. That's what they want to do. So I think that's what people usually do, and that's why we haven't heard many people taking an exit from VC in general.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely. I think that the thing that the image of VC is changing slightly. Like it used to be like one of the major target sectors for people a couple of years ago. That has changed in the recent past because VC funds are not performing as exceptionally as they did before. Not a lot of exits that we are seeing. How many tech IPOs, decently big tech IPOs have we seen in the recent past, which were like VC funded or which grew in an accelerated pace? So I think that this image or like this exit route into VC is changing a bit because even angel investors are losing lots of money currently. They've lost a lot of money in the last 2 years, so that is changing. But yes, I agree with Anya that not a lot of people make switch after working at a VC fund because people join it at a slightly later stage in their career.
Got it. Got it. Fair enough. Thank you so much for your time, Aditya. It was great having you, and I'm sure your insights are going to help everyone who watches this. So, thank you so much for giving us your time.
Thank you so much, Vani and Anya, for having me here.
Thank you so much.